Hi, everybody. Tanya Gonzalez Ortega here with Lee Walczak here on New Earth Consciousness. I'm excited to have Lee on the channel because he is a psychic medium and just excited for him to talk about his work and his journey and how he helps others. So, thank you, Lee, for being on the show with me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited
Yeah,
to be here and talk with you.
awesome. So, so tell us about your journey because I feel like, psychics really don't realize they're psychic until later in life, right? And I'm
Yeah.
sure children can be naturally very psychic, but then, we know the story. They have these spiritual gifts. Those spiritual gifts get shut down because of, whatever dysfunctional family dynamics and all the things that kids have to face nowadays. Um, yeah, so tell us about your journey. When did you realize that you had these gifts?
Yeah. So like you mentioned, it was a little later on in life for me that I connected that I had any sort of psychic abilities. Disclaimer, I think we all have psychic abilities. It's just about, for me, where somebody lands on that spectrum. Some people, are much more sensitive to these things. And it's kind of like playing an instrument. Some people can sit down and they're just really, they know what they're doing pretty quickly, right? And then other times, you have to practice a little bit more. I do think we all have unique kind of abilities to us as well, but that's a side note. But it was definitely later on in my life. I always knew growing up that there was something. I could never really put a finger on it, but that there was something different, I guess, in the way that I experienced the world from what I was seeing from other people around me, if that makes sense. It just felt like there was this sense of like I experience things a little differently than it seems like what these people around me what their experience is. So I always knew that, but I always kind of, I guess, explained it with, that I was sensitive. Sensitive just meaning, in tune with my own emotions. Sensitive now as a word has a different meaning for me. But back then,
Mm.
more about my emotions and I thought like, well, maybe I'm just like compassionate and I just feel things, that maybe other people don't really feel, but which is still true. I do feel things very deeply, and that's a part I think of where all this comes from for me. But
Mhm.
to answer your question, it wasn't until I was 21 that I really connected uh, that I connected that I was a psychic medium when I was 21. So I had this whole experience with a friend of mine, and I can tell the story if you'd like. But
Yeah, please do. Yeah, yeah, we have time.
yeah,
Sure, people are
um,
curious.
yeah. So I had been out. Well, I was 21, so I was out at a bar, with some friends of mine, and um, there was this one friend that I had that just started talking about how she felt like she was a medium, and now, I always had a strong leaning towards that stuff. Like, I wasn't a skeptic by any means. So,
Mm.
I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like, tell me more about what that looks like. And
Mhm.
so we were talking a little bit. And then at one point, she, had said that there was a soul that she was sensing over the shoulder of my other friend. And what I found interesting about that is that I had been looking over my other friend's shoulder and thought that I got this vibe. I didn't know how to explain it, but I was like, oh, so that's interesting that she's pointing this out. And so anyway, the night ended, and the next day it was a weekend, and we were perks of being 21. We were out pretty late, so the next day I was trying to take a little nap, just to kind of rejuvenate a little bit. And um, I always explain it as I don't know how I know, or how I knew, excuse me, but it was like every cell in my body just knew that a soul for the friend who I had been out with the other night, not the one who was a medium, the other one,
Mhm.
was trying to uh, get in touch with me and give me information. And of course, the logical side of my brain was like, go to sleep. But you know what I mean? Like, this isn't a thing, or I was trying to kind of explain it away, but it just would not go away. Like the feeling would not leave me. It was this sense of like, you need to call her, you need to text. So of course I'm having a conversation in my head of like, I'm not doing that. That sounds, that
Mhm.
sounds like, because there had been no discussion about any of this except for the night prior, but with this particular person, like this was not a territory we ever landed in or discussed or anything. So finally though, I gave in because it wouldn't go away. And I again it was just like every cell in my body just knew this to be true. I don't know how, it just knew. So I ended up texting her and I was like, this is gonna sound really strange, but I'm like, I feel like I have a soul here for you. And I kind of just went along with it like I had been doing it for a while because
Oh,
I, I
yeah.
didn't I didn't really know, I guess, how to approach it. I was like, how do you approach it, right? Um, so a few things were coming in that made a little sense, but not enough that it was like super what I would call like validating in my language, or anything like that. But uh, I got this sense to call, heard in my head, call her now, and I was like, I'm gonna call her now, like I don't know, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Um, so but I did. I was like, "Can I call you really quick?" And she's like, "Well, I have to go to work in about half hour, but sure, And I think a little, she was a little like, "What do I make of this?" And understandably, right? But so I called her, and that's when I felt her grandmother come through. She's given me permission, by the way, to share all of this story. But her grandmother came through, and um, I never met her grandma. I think I met her once in passing where we said like hi or something like that. We had not spoken about the details of her grandmother's passing. I figured that would come up, when she was ready to discuss it, if ever ready to discuss it. The only thing I knew was that her grandmother had passed and uh, roundabout when that had happened. But all of this other information just started, I describe it as like flooding my awareness in my consciousness,
Hmm.
and I just started saying things that um, some of the things that didn't make any sense to me, but made all the sense to her. And I think what really kind of got me on board with the fact that I was communicating with something outside the realm of my own consciousness, my own intelligence, was because I started to say things to her. Now we were on the phone; it wasn't a FaceTime or anything like that. It was just a regular audio call, um, and I started to describe things that she was doing in the moment in memory of her grandmother. So there was a point where I was saying like, I don't know if your grandmother always kind of like touched your face or your chin in a certain way, but she kind of was doing this thing that I was describing with the hit, and she's like, my friend had said, I'm doing that right now in memory of her. And clearly she's very emotional.
Hmm.
Um, she remembers this part. I don't really remember this, but she always recounts that she was touching a sweater of her grandmother's as we were on the phone and didn't say anything.
Oh,
And
wow.
I had said something to the effect of like, your grandmother, and the where he keeps the pictures specifically, and who was in the hospital room and who decided to wait outside because they were uncomfortable, and all of these really intimate things that I didn't know. So I walked away from that experience really understanding. I think at that point I'm like, oh, there's something more happening. Like I feel like this is mediumship, or what I would identify as connecting with the departed, right? So so that was the beginning of my journey.
Yeah. You said so many good, so many like you made some strong statements that I felt really resonated. One was that, everybody's psychic to a degree, you know, would you say that there's a differentiation between intuition and actually being psychic?
That's an interesting question. I love that. Thank you for that. I think it depends on who you ask, to be honest. I think sometimes people might have a definition where being psychic means one thing and intuitive means another. I personally kind of combine them all into one category. Now, I'm sure there are sort of differentiations between, certain abilities that we might have with us, and I know that even like the clairs and things like that, like clairsentience and clairvoyance, like how we receive information, like there are nuances in that.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that there is. For me personally, I kind of, it's just under the same umbrella for me. So I don't know that I've really gone the extra mile to ever really try to define it any differently. But I do understand that for some people, psychic might be, meaning that you predict things that happen in the future,
Oh, yeah,
or um,
yeah,
an intuition might be something a little different. For me, I think they all run in the same vein, though, if that makes sense.
yeah, sure. Yeah, definitely. Varying degrees. And the other thing too, what I loved that you said is like your entry into becoming a practicing psychic medium is that you just dove in. Like,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
feel like I had that experience once before too, where I never really considered myself as necessarily clairvoyant or any of that. I mean, I always felt that I was highly intuitive, but I remember, being asked, "Oh, can you do energy readings?" And I was like, and I just said, like, it just came out of my mouth. I said, "Yes, I can." And I'm like, "Well, let's see what happens." Like, I really didn't know. And then once you let go of that doubt or whatever, it's like, oh yeah, there's, and I guess, I mean, I'm sure there's people that go through training and practice and then but I don't think that's always necessary, especially if you're getting feedback from the other person that they're going like, yes, 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 this is true, that's true, it's true.
yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah.
that's awesome. I want to ask you, and when you're working with clients and you're contacting the departed loved ones or whatever, like how does that how does that help people? Does it help to create closure? Um, what are the benefits of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's different for everybody. And I think, you'll get out of a session um, what you're ready to receive.
Mm,
And so I think there are varying degrees of healing that can take place. And sometimes it's meant, I think, to be that you experience this, you know, little planting of a seed instead of a huge breakthrough or something like that. But I think it can have different faces. Um, but from what I've seen, I mean, I've gotten countless messages after the fact, about um, people telling me that it's helped them move on with their lives, and that now that there's an understanding that the loved one that has transitioned physically is actually still with them, just in a different way, and that I used to say that there's a sense of like we will be reunited one day, but I think we're reunited now. It's just that we're just on different vibrations, but they are still with us in the sense we just can't always pick up as easily maybe that they are around, or whatever it is. So I would say that they are with us now instead of even being reunited. But some people have put it that way, like I know that I'll see my loved one again,
mhm,
um, and I think that can be tremendously healing for people, especially again if they come in with a um, maybe not really a big knowing, or really a significant belief system around what happens when we pass, or if anything happens, or I think um, being able to um, embrace the idea that like, oh, like there is consciousness after we pass, and that means that my loved one is still with me. I think that can be you know hugely healing for some people. And
yeah,
then other times I think it's like I said, like planting a seed maybe, and maybe that seed will grow in the future with different future events, and everyone's path I think is a little different, but I've definitely seen it be incredibly healing for people. Yeah.
yeah, interesting. And so I'm curious about the departed souls. I've only had a couple of occurrences where I felt that I had contact, with, when my grandmother passed, I remember I was cleaning my bathroom and I clearly heard her voice in my ear. And she said, cochina, which is in Spanish is like dirty little one. And I remember she used to always say that to me as an endearing term. And for me, the way I knew that was really her, because that's not a word I ever use or even think about, right? Um, but I'm curious about and if you know this or not, I don't know, but when someone passes, do they present themselves in the way that the person remembers them, right? Because, that soul was a child at one point, maybe was a young maiden and then an older woman and whatever. So depending on the relationship, do they, I'm just curious, like, would a soul present themselves differently, let's say, if it was a child or someone's child that had passed away, who was an adult but passed away, and they left their parents behind, and maybe they present a certain way to their parents versus maybe their husband, for example, or their children, did they I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes. So I think so. How do I want to make sure I articulate this in the way that I understand.
Hmm.
So yes, if especially for what I would call an evidential mediumship reading, I do try to stay away from that term for certain reasons. I like the term validation a bit more. Validation of things that the reader couldn't possibly know, and all that, kind of like I described in the first story to some extent. Um, but yeah, so I think in order to allow you to understand, or allow the sitter to understand that this is the grandmother, um, they will come through with their personality that they had in life, or how that person remembers them. So
Hmm.
I always use the example of I if I was doing a reading, and let's say somebody's, I'll use grandmother because we're on that, somebody's grandmother was maybe not always the kindest human being, right? And this has happened, right? Maybe not always the nicest. And if I then said to the person sitting with me, oh, your grandmother's coming through and she's really lovely and she's so kind and compassionate, the person's not really going to have much of an idea of what I'm talking about, because their experience with the grandmother, whether that was everyone else's experience or not,
Hmm.
their personal experience maybe wasn't the best, so they're not really going to understand. Now, I do tell people, though, they come through with the personality to validate that it is them. However, their soul is not holding on to that anymore. So if the grandmother wasn't the nicest person in life,
Yeah.
I found actually that she's probably coming through to maybe apologize, or recognize, like, I understand that, like, I didn't always see things in the way that you needed me to, and I didn't always show up in the way that you need me to, and I want to apologize for that. But first, I think they need to get out of the way, the validation piece, so that the person does understand, oh, yeah, that sounds like my grandmother.
Right. Right.
Um, However, the soul is not carrying any of that anymore. It's just really for us to identify, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like the personality sleeve is
Yeah.
not there, right? They're more there, their pure soul essence is there. Yeah, it's so fascinating. Um, so when you are working with people, how does the information come through? Is it physical sens what kind of sensations or things come through you when you make contact?
Yeah, I get a lot of different things. I think the main way that I tend to communicate is through clairvoyance, which is, I think it translates to clear seeing. So
Mhm.
images in my own mind. I'm not typically seeing things outwardly, although that has happened sometimes.
Mhm.
Um, I also work a lot through clairsentience, so clear feeling. So just feeling different things, inside of my own self. Um, and also claircognizance, which is, I joke that it's like the hardest one to describe and understand sometimes, because it's clear knowing, but
Yeah.
it's just knowing something and not knowing how you know it. It's just like it's there, but I don't know how I know that. Um, Occasionally, I will get sensations in my actual physical body as well.
Mhm.
Like if someone maybe had a lot of shoulder pain in life, I might, start feeling something in my shoulder. I do actually tell spirit now, though, to please not do that unless it's completely necessary, just because I'm not always super ready to go on that ride, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, so, so I tell them, if you can get the message across just any other way, like, please feel free. But if it's not coming through any other way and I'm not getting it, then
Yeah.
okay. Uh, but yeah, I think those are the main ones. But I had instances, I think, of probably all of them, to be honest. There's a few more of the clairs and all of that. So I've heard things audibly, but my main ways of communicating are those.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And so, and I'm curious, um, you make contact with, departed human souls. Do you ever make contact with any other type of species, like pets, or even like, I don't know, other beings from other realms? I mean, I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I get pets. Yes, I believe pets are, I mean, their consciousness as well, their energy as well. So they go on and they can come back and communicate. I've dealt with dogs and cats, of course, and even things like horses and hamsters. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, not typical for me, but it has surely happened. Um, I have, as far as like other beings, there are angelic beings and things like that, as I call them, that, have come through
Mm,
and even validated their presence for me. And
mm,
so I find that pretty fascinating. I don't always work with other types of beings, but if there's a message for the highest good, like I always invite, whatever being that serves the light, right? I
yeah,
invite
right.
it in, and I welcome it if it's going to be, for somebody's healing or for my healing or for my forward movement or somebody's, excuse me, forward movement.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, all different types of things, but definitely pets. And um, I think I deal with the angelic realm of things a bit more in my own personal experience. I find a lot of people are coming to me to understandably speak to, their departed human loved ones.
Mhm.
So I think it's a bit more prevalent in my personal experience that I have
Gotcha.
those kind of dynamics.
Yeah, yeah. And do you have like as far as a personal practice, or I mean, I guess I feel like once one person knows that they have special gifts, or they're here to serve and whatever, that there can feel, at least for myself, kind of like, okay, if this is the path that I'm going to walk, then I am committed to, you know, maintaining the highest vibration possible in my own vessel, right? So, and I feel like people have different practices for that. I was curious, like, do you have a personal practice that helps you to, remain a clear channel for the work that you do?
Yeah, and I agree too that I think, it is because the information is coming through me. So, me being the channel, I'm a part of the whole process. So yeah, I mean, I try to get outside as much as possible, taking a walk outside at least for 30 minutes every day. I think it's just, I mean, I think that's good for a lot of things, but it's also
For everyone?
yeah, for everyone, not just mediums, but it's very grounding. So just trying to be, in nature. I think that's the quickest way for me to kind of like recenter a little bit, because obviously we're also human and experiencing the
Right.
human stressors and all the things.
Yeah.
Um, but I get movement in every day as well beyond walking. So I try to, just for me, yoga works. So I do yoga like twice a day if possible, but typically it's the routine is twice a day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, other things as I'm called, like, if I feel like I need to release anger or something like, then I have exercises that I'll do for that. Or if I feel like I have to release other emotions, whatever those might be, I do sometimes things like writing and burning and journaling. And so anything that's really, I think that's the part I try to be conscious of is the moving whatever energy maybe needs to
Yeah.
be moved. And admittedly, sometimes I'm absolutely better at that than other times. But, I think there's also, there's always an awareness, right? Of like, okay, I'm holding on to maybe some of this, and this probably needs to be cleared out a little bit. So how can I move this, and then how can I move forward from that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Um, so tell us about, how can people find you, and do you have, yeah, how do you work? Do you just offer one-off sessions, or do you offer a program, or what do you have available for people?
Yeah, so currently I don't have any programs. Sometimes I have done those in the past, like different workshop classes, that type of dynamic. So that in the future can always, be a possibility.
Mhm.
Um, I do one-on-one sessions. I do group sessions as well. And on Facebook, sometimes actually I do like live little readings and things. I go live every week, twice a week.
Mhm.
One day is typically just to talk about whatever is on my heart that day around spirituality, around what I feel people might benefit from. And then typically, Thursdays I'll do some reading so people can kind of interact and see too, how I work and what that looks like. So so yeah, and I'm also offering a new type of reading at the moment as well that I'm kind of excited about. It's just in short, it's a bit less about the evidence and the validation. However, that does come through typically, but it's more leaning into like the wisdom and the message that spirit has to offer for the person in the moment.
Mhm.
So I've been having a lot of fun with those, um, but yeah, I think the easiest way to find me probably Facebook. I am on there under psychic medium Lee Walczak. Um, there are some cloned pages of me, unfortunately, so
Oh,
I always just
really? Oh,
yeah. Um,
wow.
so
Shoot.
and unfortunately they're trying to like scam people out of their money. So if anyone I always say, if anyone, use your discernment, right? But if anyone's trying to message you and say that they're me, it's not me. So so just putting that out there. But
You mean you're not cold DMing people trying to get them to send you money?
not today. No, no, I don't do that. But yeah, so just discernment, right? But because I want to keep everyone safe. But um on Instagram, you can find me there. I don't post too much there, but you can locate me there. Under Lee Walczak, just my name, no spaces, anything like that.
Yeah, we'll
And
have that in the
yeah,
description section here below the video. Yeah, make
and
sure.
then TikTok is as well, but I'm not typically on there either. So Facebook is probably the easiest way, or by email. So that's how I would suggest you find me. My website is currently underway,
Okay,
uh, so yeah.
awesome, awesome. Well, Lee, thank you so much. I appreciate your presence and yeah, just sharing with us um, your story and the work that you do. Yeah, I think that mediumship is can be really healing for so many people, especially when the death of a loved one was sudden, for sure, and can help to bring closure. And so if anybody is, please, check Lee out. Share this video with anyone that you think would benefit. Please like and subscribe to this channel. Share it with others and working on growing and just spreading, yeah, just spreading the good news and um, just different ways, different pathways that we can all find inner peace and healing and bring down the new earth. So thank you, Lee, so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate
Okay.
it.
Okay, until next time.